People around the world paused today to remember South Africa's first black president, Nelson Mandela, and his legacy fighting for equal rights. But as the world marked Mandela Day, South Africa still suffers inequality, like a collapsing public health system. Tonight, there are fears COVID-19 will make the situation in South Africa even worse, where already 350,000 people have been infected. Health officials say the country is on a similar pandemic path as the U.S., Brazil, India, and Russia, and could soon become one of the hardest hit countries. And on the day Nelson Mandela is remembered for his fearless advocacy, the world mourns an American civil rights hero who helped change history. Longtime Georgia Congressman John Lewis lost his battle with cancer at the age of 80. Lewis served for 33 years in Congress and was fighting for equal rights long before that. Jennifer Johnson reports on his legacy and guiding light for future generations.
Congressman John Lewis was a man of dedication, a champion for his country and the fight for civil rights. The son of Alabama sharecroppers, Lewis believed peaceful protests could change history.
We can change America, and in changing America, we can change the world.
Arrested more than 40 times, often beaten, Lewis was one of the leaders of the nonviolent protest movement against laws in the South that segregated white and black Americans in schools, buses, even drinking fountains. In 1963, Lewis was the youngest speaker at the March on Washington. But it was this 1965 march that started in Selma, Alabama, heading to Montgomery, the state's capital, that made Lewis famous.
When we were marching across that bridge, just simple saying people wanted to register to vote.
They got as far as the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma.
Turn around and disperse.
And they came toward us, beating us with nightsticks, using tear gas and trampling us with horses.
That day is known as Bloody Sunday. Lewis was left with a fractured skull. The images of police brutality ignited a nation. 5 months later, President Lyndon Johnson signed the Voting Rights Act into law.
I'm John Lewis, running for Congress.
Lewis kept fighting against racial injustice in Washington. Elected in 1986, he became one of the country's leading liberal Democrats, never backing down from a fight, from health care to gun control to the impeachment of U.S. President Donald Trump.
When you see something that is not right, not just, not fair, you have a moral obligation to say something, to do something.
Despite battles between Lewis and the president, flags have been lowered to half-mast at the White House. Tributes have poured in from former presidents and current politicians as Americans mourn this loss. In 2011, President Barack Obama awarded Lewis the Presidential Medal of Freedom, America's highest civilian honor.
When parents teach their children what is meant by courage, the story of John Lewis will come to mind.
Lewis became a published author and won the National Book Award in 2016, an emotional tribute for a man denied a library card as a child.
And we were told that the library was for whites only and not for coloreds. And to come here and receive this award, this honor with this, it's too much.
Just weeks before his death, Lewis summoned the strength to visit the Black Lives Matter Plaza in Washington. He was surrounded by activists in awe of his courage and strength.
It was very moving.
5 years ago, almost to the day, Lewis tweeted one of his mugshots with the caption, "Even though I was arrested, I smiled because I was on the right side of history. Find a way to get in the way." Jennifer Johnson, Global News, Washington.
Calls for racial justice and an end to systemic racism remain strong in the aftermath of George Floyd's killing. Today, demonstrators in Toronto rallied to defund the city's police service and took aim at some historic monuments. 3 people were arrested after protesters tossed paint on statues of Canada's first Prime Minister, Sir John A. Macdonald, a statue of King Edward VII outside the Ontario Legislature, and on the monument to Egerton Ryerson on the Ryerson University campus. Members of the Toronto chapter of Black Lives Matter said the statues perpetuate the history of colonialism and anti-black violence.